Welcome back. You're watching the Daily Report. In studio, we have Professor Peter Kagwanja. Virtually is Dr. Hassan Kanenje, Director, Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies, as well as Benson Cheserek, Business and Political Analyst, joining us from North Carolina. Dr. Then let's look at the international outlook of the U.S. and how then the U.S. is seeking to be seen and to portray itself in the rest of the world. Do you think that there will be any tectonic or very significant or over-significant changes that we'll see not only in Kenya but also across the globe touching on the U.S.?
Yeah, most certainly. I think the presence of a Chinese vice president alone is significant in telling. And nothing like that has happened, I think, in recent years. And considering the kind of relationship that existed between Donald Trump and the People's Republic of China in the past administration, I think this is significant, and I think it is intended to send a message that he wants, being a deal maker, he is ready to make some deals, as I think reflected by his willingness, number one, to save TikTok from potential ban, which, of course, something that was done in a bipartisan way at some point early last year. As second, he was very clear he wants to be a peacemaker. He's been very consistent with regard to his uneasiness with regard to continued funding in Ukraine, to end it in the war. Of course, it's unlikely that's going to achieve that, but I think all evidence is going to limit its force, military as well as equipment in Ukraine, considering the amount of money involved, and also considering it is with the political base. On other aspects like climate, you're likely to see the U.S., I think, with the drop in a significant way, and that is going to affect, including Kenya's own place as a for the climate agenda, kind of occupied within much of the last 2 years, because U.S. funding is actually critical to the extent that there's a likelihood there's not going to be support. Of course, is going to avoid to that. But then there are going to be serious changes in the relations. It's not a very big fund of spending to protect Europe without pulling up their socks and bring their own pattern. And so there's a likelihood there's going to be changes in that, as well as relations, perhaps in a way that perhaps Europeans may not like it very much. But I don't think the rest of the world may care very much.
Indeed. Benson Cheserek, I wonder, how is the business community, from especially the Kenyan business community, viewing in terms of continuation and once again the mood like in terms of the continuation of President Trump's administration moving forward? Do you think, or do you foresee the expansion of such opportunities for the African continent and especially for Kenyans in the US and vice versa?
Well, I want to remember that Donald Trump campaigned on social tariff. And my friend Dr. Hassan just mentioned about money intervention. One of the biggest issues is one of the reasons why we have this vice president here is one of the issue of tariffs. Donald Trump promised that he's going to put a lot of tariffs on things that are going to be in this country. So what does that mean? First of all, that means that anything here in the diaspora will benefit, because there is an incentive that comes with that. You face a taxation if you do business. The great perception that there be doing business here. Now, as far as our country, African countries, is concerned, to be honest with you, until probably we see the specifics of some of the executive orders or some of the policies that are going to be proposed, we may not be able to know whether Trump is going to actually do anything to improve either business in Africa or business in other places. But you can tell the major trading partners of the United States are already trying to come close to him more importantly, to reduce or to try to avoid the tariff, especially the closer countries, Canada and Mexico, some of the biggest trading partners here in the United States. That is where their worry is. What I would foresee happening is a situation where Africans will have to negotiate for better trade investments and other things to come in. But Trump is trying to invest in United States. He wants things to be produced in United States. He has been anti-China in so many things. That is an opportunity for Africans here to sit down, if they can be able to sway Trump to do some of these things in Africa, if it is possible, so that they can even slow down the issue of migration. Because if there can be incentives for Americans to start businesses there, or for investors to flock there so that they can avoid China, because you can see this is a war between West and East, then Africa could become a resultant beneficiary of some of these policies. But it will depend specifically on what the African leaders will do.
Dr. Kanenje, when you look at the peace aspects that even Professor Kagwanja mentioned earlier on, Donald Trump said he would end the Russia-Ukraine war in 48 hours. How practical are some of his suggestions and policies, perhaps? Dr. Kanenje, you still there? We will get to Dr. Kanenje in a short while. But Prof, when we talk about the peace, and you mentioned it and you alluded to it earlier on, and you talk about the world having a deficiency of peace that they now see in Trump, how practical is it to end the war in 48 hours, the Russia war?
I think what he did is he demonstrated that one day before he was sworn in, he has made a remarkable success in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian war, that some hostages have returned home in America and elsewhere. So already saying that he had started the behind the curtains negotiations to end the war in Palestine. And I think that is something you can give it to him, that he is going to do something. I don't know how fast with Palestine, but with Ukraine, that will can even be in less than 48 hours. Why? Because America has been one of the key supporters of this war. The moment you drain the swamps of Zelensky's support, now how can he wage war? So, and it's a question of agreeing with the Russians on what they themselves are going to do as soon as this other side stops the war. Remember, this is not your really kind of classic war between Russia and Ukraine. This is a proxy war between NATO and Russia. And therefore, as soon as America withdraws its support to NATO, it's finished. Remember also what Joe Biden's strategy was to ensure that Europe does not depend on on oil and gas from Russia, but depend on oil and gas from across the Atlantic. And what Trump is trying to say is that without saying it, and if you judge it from his first term, he's not a very strong believer of NATO or the transatlantic kind of a treaty. Yeah. So that sounds like he's likely to settle the battle in Ukraine. What does that mean for us in Kenya and the rest of Africa? It means that we are going to begin the recovery from the devastation that came with rising prices. Our oil, our fertilizers and everything is going to go down because there is no war. You can get it from Ukraine or you can get it from Russia as war ends. Let's also, I think somebody mentioned about the presence of the Vice President of China in this inauguration. I think that's really a big sign that we are going to end or tone down major powers conflict. Remember, Joe Biden started on the opposite by inaugurating what is called the U.S. National Security Strategy in October 2022. And this was a declaration of war, short of saying we are in an open war, because he only left an area for China where they can cooperate on a number of issues, like climate change and so on. But in the rest of the space, it was superpower competition. If you read that document, still online. I have never read such a hostile document in recent years, since the end of the Cold War. It was very, very hostile. And that meant that the two powers, not at the level of trade, as we had seen the trade wars with Trump before in the second round, but in this case, it's geopolitical. It started affecting us. And Kenya is one of the countries that faced the full brunt of the, that kind of superpower confrontation. And you could feel it during our last election, when we openly came out to attack our main financier, our main trading partner, and so on. And most of us were asking, where is this coming from? It was coming from this document, which had clearly indicated, I think in page 49, that Africa is a major frontier in this ideological warfare. The main thrust of this ideological warfare, not expansion of trade and so on. It was essentially the ideology of human rights. You are with us or against us kind of engagement. I think that's going to be toned down. Documents like these ones are going to be irrelevant. And I think we're going to forge a new understanding between powers by toning down the ideological tension between China and America. China itself was forced to make its own declaration after this. Therefore, it came with 3 initiatives. The Global Security Initiative, which is basically saying that collectively we are going to deal with our own security to counter what America is coming. The Global Civilizational Initiative, saying all civilizations are equal. No civilization should pretend that it is more powerful and more important than other civilizations. And finally, they came up with what they are calling Global Development Initiative, basically to counter this kind of strangulation of powers who do not toe the line of the America. Of course, the language was different, but China reacted that way.
Okay.
So yeah, this is we are looking forward to a new world order, and I think that's why personally I was very optimistic about the second Trump, because the Donald Trump for the Democrats was okay, but for those people who are in terms of a value-based human relations, shared values approach to geopolitical relations.
Okay.
I think the previous regime was such a frustration, and even at home, that is why Kamala Harris lost, because she amplified more about gender and all those things rather than what was ailing the Americans, the unemployment. Lack of jobs, declining domestic resources. So essentially that is how I see it. And that's why there is an optimism. Of course, Kenyans are divided into 2. Those who support Trump, the Gen Zs, and those who support the regime that was defeated, and those are us. Okay. The Gen X and the baby boomers, who are only 2% of the total population.
Dr. Kanenje, there was this perception that Kenyans, a section of them, if you followed what was going online, wanted and thought that Trump would quote-unquote tame African countries that were not getting in order. Do you think that is a practical thing? Whereas, of course, there is territorial integrity by every nation. But what are some of the things that perhaps African countries, Kenya, would need to start aligning itself and saying, okay, this is what the U.S. is going for?
First of all, Donald Trump is not an interventionist. So you're not expecting him to start meddling in the internal affairs of many. But you need to expect that when it comes to areas, whether it's on energy or on security or defense, I think that is something that you should expect that African countries, some of them are going to expect it to draw the line. There's going to be, I think, an emphasis on, for instance, fighting terrorism, which is something that also Republicans like. There's going to be pushback when it comes to, immigration. And I think countries on the continent are going to be required to ensure that they manage immigration in ways that they don't end up in the United States and the U.S. likely to commit more resources, as I think evidence in the speech that Donald Trump just made today, using even the military, to prevent people from coming from Mexico as well as other parts of Latin America. And so I think he's going to support efforts to keep African immigrants within Africa. And these efforts are already ongoing by a number of European countries, so it will not be the first thing that Donald Trump, is starting to do. But I think there's likelihood that he's going to double that. There is perhaps going to be a little bit more focus on expansion of exploitation of fossil fuels, and there's a likelihood that countries that are, are in that path perhaps may get some support from the United States. But I think outside some of those key things, Donald Trump is not exactly an internationalist person. And I think he wants to be remembered, despite the at least an image from the liberal side of things that he loves dictators and stuff like that. He wants to present himself as a peacemaker. He does not want to start new wars, and he would like to be able to end the existing ones. So at least he's able to achieve some of his aims. But to the extent that he's going to interfere in the internal affairs of African countries, I think that is something he's not exactly very keen to do, because it takes resources and it may cost lives. And that goes counter to his beliefs and goes counter to some of the conservative, members or rather supporters, of the United States, of course, who are going to be key, not just this year, but in 2 years' time, you're going to have, a midterm elections. And if he has not been able to meet some of these, promises that he's already made, then of course the Republicans are going to get, in the words of Donald Trump, a shellacking in which they may not recover from, until perhaps 2028. And so I think he's very keen to avoid that.
Indeed, and your closing remarks, and perhaps just a minute, Dr. Hello? Okay, let's get the closing. Yeah.
Oh, myself? Okay.
Yes.
Let me add something quickly as I close.
Yes.
Especially the issue of Ukraine and the US. Most of you understand that US superpower has been projected based on how they put in together a coalition of countries, especially NATO, when Prof at the studio there said. So a defeat in Ukraine actually would almost look like a weakened America, because they have to project that power, their ability to put together a serious coalition that can fight on these issues. So you really never know what could happen. And I think when reality settles in for Donald Trump, that he has to defeat, or Ukraine has to win this war. And you can understand that this war actually started because of what? Ukraine wanted to join the NATO and Russians didn't want, and this is a possibility where US could finally project their true superpower of the world. On my final comments in regard to Africa,
yes,
Donald Trump presidency could be that what we call a blessing in disguise. The fact that US may not interfere with so many things happening in Africa, this could be an opportunity for Africans to chart their way forward. Democrats have always been intrusive in so many things, especially on social issues. This could be a moment for African leaders to develop their own way of doing things, whether it's business, social issues. And I am looking at a situation where if Africans don't prepare themselves, they may be in a rupture.
Indeed, thank you so much. Professor Kagwanja, let's come to you and look at the energy conversation. You alluded to it earlier, and perhaps how can then, because we've seen the direction that Kenya is taking, clean energy and all, Donald Trump is drill, baby drill, you said that earlier. Briefly, as you compound even with your closing remarks, do you think there is a potential problem?
No, I don't think there's a potential problem. And one of the unspoken truths about the climate conference in Nairobi, which was hosted by President William Ruto, was the discomfort within a number of countries like Tanzania, Angola, Mozambique, and others that are, having oil reserves, because the shift to the clean energy emphasis meant that Africa has basically to stop drilling or using its own oil and then taking it to the marketplace. And this happens at a time when Africa has just begun exploring its own oil. And as such, even in America, the movement for the so-called clean energy meant that America was not exploiting the oil, which Donald Trump is calling the liquid gold under Americans' feet. So I think we are not really saying that you don't begin to think hard and fast about climate change and its impact in societies, but it is about the transition. So it is more about the energy transition. How do you transition to clean energy without disrupting economies and without preventing economies from investing in the resources that they have. Take, for instance, we are known polluters. And that is why today, if you looked at the dailies today, they were reporting about the Kenya government's interest in following from what Tulo has been doing in Turkana, and doing more exploration in Wajir, in Kilifi, and other parts of the country. That's what was in the papers today. What is the context of that? Because America has changed. We also have got the latitude. This emphasis on renewable energy is very good, but it also comes with heavy technological capacity, which we don't have access to. We have not started hearing about manufacturing of renewable cars in Kenya. Or any other parts, meaning we are going to import these technologies from outside, which is what we are doing. Okay. And if we can do our oil, that would okay. So in my closing remark, I think I want to say the following, that one, what has happened in America, and I agree with Dr. Terry, is essentially a blessing in disguise. It is a blessing for Africa that we are going to make independent decisions about our own development and about our future. And second, our relationship with America is going to be interest-based. It is not going to be based on superpower, weak power relationship, which was the case with Joe Biden. There was a lot of camaraderie. You could see it in visiting heads of state. But underneath that was a very, very iron-fisted, neo-colonial force, whereby you are to toe the line of the American, internal interest. Now we can have a good relationship with America based on our own interest and also based on their own interest, particularly in the area of security and the area of development. About human rights and other issues, that is a human issue. It's a global issue. It's not an American issue. Abductions and all that are already in the United Nations law. We can deal with it with them that way. But essentially, development is a big, big issue, particularly in Africa, where poverty has been increasing, not decreasing. Increasing.
Indeed, absolutely. Thank you so much. And what a way to wind up the show tonight. We've been speaking to Professor Peter Kagwanja here in studio. He is an international relations expert and policy advisor. Thank you, Prof. Dr. Hassan Kanenje, Director, Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies, as well as Benson Cheserek, business and political analyst, joining us from North Carolina tonight. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. My name is George Maringa. On Sign Language interpretation has been Rhoda Nyamai. Good night from Nairobi. Stay safe and be kind to one another.